Well, now we're going to explore how small businesses are leveraging artificial intelligence to boost productivity, expand capabilities, and strengthen their workforce. This panel will highlight practical applications of AI that drive growth while supporting employees and creating new opportunities. Our panelists represent diverse applications of AI technology. We have with us Amanda Martinez, the founder of ClimateChain, and you've heard a little bit about how she's trying to tokenize some energy credits. We may hear more about that. We have Dr. Karen Gorton, Associate Dean of the Fay W. Whitney School of Nursing. She's a doctorally prepared nurse educator with over 25 years of leadership experience in Sigma Theta Tau International and clinical experience in emergency nursing. Dalton Gregory, a serial entrepreneur and AI innovator, the sixth-generation Wyomingite and UW graduate, founded the O3 LLC to help small businesses implement AI solutions and serves as a chief technologist at Jump Partners Incorporated. He's a Daniels Fund Ethical Startup Award recipient. And of course, we will also have with us the well-known Steve Lupien.
Stay out of the way of the smartest people who could be sitting up here.
Please help me welcome this panel.
You've all heard way too much from me already today. So first of all, thank you to all of you for being here. This panel is really interesting to me because of the diversity of this panel, from academics to students to the energy industry. So, but the common theme is that there is I think a sea change happening in technology today. One of the things I kind of joke about with my students is I'm unique in that almost my entire education has been parochial, including my undergraduate and my Jesuit graduate work. And one thing, and I'm old too. And I remember, having the faculty, always say to me, "You're never gonna, you'll never be carrying a calculator with you everywhere you go. So we need to learn everything." Because, why did I get the multiplication tables beaten into me? Because you won't always have a calculator with you. Well, I got bad news. I really kind of do. And the other thing I think, I'm going to direct the first question to you around this because of your background. One of the things I think we as educators have to deal with is I think there's a shift in how we need to teach, because, it used to be that we learned knowledge, we learned facts, but today facts are available to us everywhere we go. And so today, I think the real challenge is, how do we process those facts? And how do we apply those facts into our daily lives? So I know, big question. I'm going to lead you with it. Can you solve the problems of the education world for us, please? Here.
Not really.
But I want to throw that first question to you because of your unique background. I can now pick up my phone and ask Siri when the Declaration of Independence was signed. I don't have to memorize that anymore. But so what?
So what? I mean, in healthcare, when I started, it took 5 years for our knowledge base to double. Mm-hmm. That number is down to anywhere between, depending on what you read, 9 to 12 months. Our healthcare knowledge doubles. So how do you then teach your students? You can't teach them to know everything. You can teach them to know concepts and know how to identify, as well as then you teach them how to think. So in healthcare education, we don't want them to memorize and dump. Mm-hmm. We want them to understand, know, and critically analyze each situation. Because in healthcare, as a nurse, I'm an investigator. I have to figure out what my patient is telling me, not with their words, but with their symptoms. What are they telling me? What do they look like? What do they sound like? What do they smell like? How do I integrate all of those and then make an informed decision, and then use hard data to say, well, I know that these are out of range, and then I make a decision and communicate with a healthcare professional. Now, granted, we do have some early alerts that will come up. For example, when somebody's what we call septic, when they have an infection throughout their whole body, that our electronic health records can help us identify that. It will go through the patient's data and say, oop, alert, alert, look at this. This is a potential, but it still requires the human brain to work with it. So for education and artificial intelligence and the fact that I have a calculator or an encyclopedia, I mean, yeah, I don't have a tab in Britannica
How
anymore.
much more, just going to clinical for a minute, how much more information do you need to process today, and how has that changed throughout your career? Has the amount of presentable information on, you've got a 70-year-old patient, who ostensibly has 65 years worth of health records, hopefully in a perfect world. How can you possibly deal with that in today's world with the amount of information that's available?
You learn to read quick. No, but I mean, it's true, but that 65 years of healthcare information may not be accessible across electronic health records. It may be paper and pencil in one place. It may be on a system called Epic. It may be on Meditech. It may be on Cerner. However, we do supposedly have an interoperability mandate, still has been working since the late 90s, but you have to be able to skim and you have to be able to analyze what's their presenting factor and what are things that I might look for in my quick scan of their electronic health record. So you still have to be able to understand, like, what are some of the hallmark signs or symptoms of something that may be presenting to me. So while we have AI that, well, what does this disease process look like, or what can it be? It's not always accurate because it's only as good as what's been put in. Is it a large language model, which is very different than, I think, how many of you have seen the ads by IBM about Watson? They've been engaged in healthcare for a long time, and they're taking patient data sets and looking to say, what are the commonalities? So they're doing a retrospective analysis with those individuals that they have permission to look at their charts. So that sometimes can help. And that Watson type of approach is how some of these alerts are built into the system and say, okay, what's the national average of somebody who's going to be septic or have a multi-system infection and organ failure? What are the early warning signs for that? And that's where you get those warnings that come up in your electronic health record when you're in an acute care clinical setting. When you're at home, no, you got to figure it out. You are it. When you're at home now, I mean, you might have a resource, but do you have internet access? So you have to be able to know and understand, and then get on a telephone, if it's a landline, to communicate with who your resource is. And pretty much you're the resource if you're doing home health, you're doing public health. You are it. So it's there. We need to learn how to understand and harness it, but then recognize that AI is only as good as the information that gets put into it.
Right. And let me move over to Dalton, because Dalton has really made himself an expert on, I think, a unique technology that could address some of this, although we probably won't be talking about healthcare with Dalton, which is digital twins. And that's how Dalton and I really began to work together is optimizing one system by duplicating it. Essentially, you want to take a minute and do a better definition of digital twinning and how you think when you combine these new knowledge tools with something like digital twinning, how we can improve systems efficiency.
Yeah, so I think digital twins it's a very broad topic. You have a bunch of different levels of digital twins. So you can go through and simulate a real world asset. You can go through and build digital twins to actually be able to communicate with other digital twins. This is similar to what you see in Tesla vehicles, where one Tesla that's on the road in Florida is going to be talking to the other 40 that are on the same freeway as that one. I think that there's a pretty broad spectrum in terms of how you can use a digital twin, but I do think digital twins are they have a lot of capabilities. They're a great tool. So you can build agents on top of a digital twin. You can go through and specify them to a certain person. We're building a product right now at Jump Partners where each user that signs up on our platform actually gets their own digital twin, and we're simulating that user and their digital persona to be able to help them block scams. This basically will go through tap links. We've built agentic capabilities inside of it. So if there's a malicious link inside of that text message or email, it'll go through, view that link, say, hey, this is safe or not. But digital twins really have a lot of different capabilities, whether you're looking to, simulate an asset or a person, whatever that may be.
Do you think, before I bring Amanda in on some more traditional AI stuff, do you think we are reaching the capability where you could actually digitally twin human systems and be able to identify potential medical risks, or is that we just not nearly there yet?
I think there's a lot of development that needs to come to fruition in wearables and where IoT devices are actually put to use on a human.
Please.
And now I'll answer that too, because that's what I was prepared to talk about. But we can look at digital twins and what it looks like in healthcare at very different levels. Is it matching a patient? Is it doing an organ? Is it doing a system? But it's not been able to do the whole body. Because if I have a digital twin and I drink water from one fountain and that digital twin doesn't do that, is that why something occurred? We can't control that environment yet for a person, but yet we can make digital twins, and they're doing it with some of the, heart surgery, lung surgery. They create a 3D model. That's a digital twin of that organ. So they can do it about the organ. And they're also using that wearable too to say, okay, physiologically, what are the differences? But then you come to the ethical part. Who owns the data?
Great point.
And are they selling the data? Yeah.
I think there's another kind of aspect to that around where I'll actually frame.
No, I think the healthcare industry is unique because, and almost every other industry, there is an unbelievable rush to sell data in order to improve systems. Where we're actually in the healthcare world, I think we're constrained the other way. In that I don't think any of us want to have any of that data sold. I certainly don't, because, being kind of a small L libertarian, I don't trust where that data will eventually go. Will my healthcare, my healthcare insurances be constrained because I've got a genetic marker or a type of cancer, or am I prone to heart disease because 3 generations back my grandparents had a heart disease? I'm worried about that stuff.
And correct, because you have a digital marker, does that mean you will trigger that? Because was that environmental or not? And so we don't know those answers. So there's so much that's unknown when we think about this AI created digital twin. Is it ethical? Is it moral? Can somebody deny you something for something that may never, ever happen to you? But there's a marker. There we go.
Right. And, and again, my concern is always when the leap is made that excluding Steve from something is better for the whole of the body. I talk about, and I'm going to get off topic here, and I apologize. I am a adamant opponent to certain forms of digital money, in particular something called a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, because I'm concerned about the government being able to control what my money can be spent on. And it could start out as simple as, gee, Steve, your Ford F-150 is burning too much gas. We're only going to let you, spend $200 a month in gas, and then you can't use your money anymore. And if you have a problem with that, buy a Prius. Okay. But how far is that a leap to your BMI is over 25? And in our national healthcare system, your BMI creates an undue burden on a larger group. So guess what? You can't go to McDonald's until you get your BMI under 25. When does that public good become a challenge to personal liberty? That's what the world that I live in. So
I would say that there is kind of an interesting point there. Like with digital twins, there's certain things technologically you can do to ensure anonymity. So something that we're doing, we're using a stack called federated learning, where we can actually improve the global model. So you piece it out to have digital twins for each user, but then we have a global model that all of those digital twins, individual digital twins, actually feed into this global model as nodes. And the way that we've done it is no data actually leaves the user's device. So because of these IoT devices and the digital twins are having that data stream in from these IoT devices, you can pick and choose actually what data you're sending to this digital twin. And I think there's something to be said about.
And I think you see that in some of the international research that's trying to happen with some of these rare disease process. They don't ever release the data, but they say, well, these are some of the characteristics. And then there's the idea, does that, the nodes, do they forget or do they constantly remember? Because that's another problem once you start looking at AI. Is that AI, as they learn, are they forgetting prior learning, or do they hold that to be true so they always have a constant foundation?
Let me bring Amanda in. Okay. I've known Amanda 6-7 years, and Amanda, when I met Amanda, it was through Power and Energy, which is very important to the state as well too. And Amanda has worked quite a bit with some of the cutting edge layer one chains that are integrating blockchain and AI together, which I think is a very powerful combination. So I know you're not a medical expert, and we've kind of gone that way, but
well, let me take a little bit of a left with you guys here.
Yeah.
I like it slight left. How many people? What do you guys think is going to be the biggest job in the next 8 years? The biggest sector of industry that's going to be changing? Anybody? The most employable? What do you think, Steve?
Payment systems.
Oh, yeah, I'm going in a different direction.
Okay, well,
So, physical labor, and it's pipe fitters and electricians. Why is that? Because we have to build a massive infrastructure to support AI.
Mhm.
So what does that mean? That means that right now we're building off of the needs of technology that is extremely inefficient. So the prediction is in the next, I would say, I think it was 4 years, we're going to balloon the use of water at data centers by 400%. Means we're going to be using, I believe it's 400 billion gallons of water is going to go to data center use.
we don't have enough of that now.
Right. So where does that come from if we don't fix that efficiency problem? That comes from landowners and ranchers. So when you see technologists buying up ranch land, a lot of that is because of the associated water rights with that land. And the water rights are a whole different subject, and they transfer in different ways in different states. But the point of the story is a lot of people are going to great efforts to accumulate water rights to deal with this massive inefficient infrastructure system. So where do we head with this? We got to figure out how to incentivize the AI companies to actually deliver us more efficient AI technology. How do you do that? You got to be able to track and trace efficiencies at extremely granular levels. And when you can start tracking and tracing efficiencies at very extremely granular levels, you can compound those savings and actually sell them off as certificates of efficiency. In a variety of industries, it's called something different. Not the favorite subject matter of most, but sometimes it's carbon credits, sometimes it's particulate matter credits, sometimes it's the emission of the actual power generation itself. So you have a need that's coming quickly to incentivize these folks to build efficiently, but also to incentivize the super new AI innovation, things like neuromorphic AI, which is about 200% more efficient. And the actual chip infrastructure associated with neuromorphic AI, which is very, very specialized in those silicon chips, and that all that manufacturing is very nuanced, but extremely important for these improvements. So it's something that energy and tracking and tracing, how energy is used, how water is used, how all of the resources associated with what the AI data centers use. That's what we built in North Star. So we're working on this project. Tegan in the back over there, he's heading up the project management. Stephen and a couple of other, and Cam.
Over there, yeah.
Yep. And a couple of other folks at the university are helping us do just that. So it is something that we should all be paying really close attention to, because if we don't, farmland will be fallowed and all of that will go directly to these data centers. So for the people that care about that and land use, this is projects like ours are pretty important.
You want to follow up on?
Yeah, I was going to follow up with that. So interestingly enough, I'm in working of a token that is going to tokenize water. I think it'll be called AquaCoin is the name of it. But basically what we're trying to do is incentivize farmers and agriculturists, ranchers, whoever they may be, to actually conserve water, build a token based on that. And then companies like Walmart or even AI labs are able to go through and burn those tokens to say, hey, we're offsetting, or we're making sure, very similar to a carbon credit.
Yeah, you can actually support the ranchers to also be more efficient in that sense, and then provide them with the revenue from those tokens as the AI companies need to buy that.
Because the challenge with water, and it's interesting that I just recently read a couple of articles about this, and one of the articles took kind of a dark view in saying that the next civil wars in the United States are going to be fought over water, and because there really is, when you look at water today, there are the haves and the have-nots, and we're kind of fortunate here in Wyoming that we're kind of the mountain or the headwaters. And if you're down in Arizona or California, you're kind of on the wrong end of the deal there. But we have our own problems as well too. I'm not an expert on this, but there's a lake up in Jackson, Wyoming, which is in Wyoming, but it's owned by Idaho, I think it is. And they have the rights to our water. Well, that's all fine and dandy until we need it. And so I do agree, but let's stay on AI for a minute, because there's right now, from a regulatory standpoint, and I'm going to hit the good doctor here. From a regulatory standpoint, right now we have kind of an interesting challenge happening to us. And one of the examples I'd like to set the stage for is, I think there was a pivotal event in around the year 1999, 2000, where the Clinton administration was faced with, do we regulate the internet or do we allow the internet to operate unregulated? And the argument was there that, well, there's a lot of nasty things on the internet, and do we want to, if we regulate it, we can remove those nasty things. But if we don't regulate it, then, it will allow our economy to flourish and grow. And I believe the Clinton administration took the right decision, which was kind of hands off. We're facing that in education today. We're facing that, I think, from a regulatory standpoint today, where there are calls to reel in this technology from a regulatory standpoint. So I'd like to tee that question up to our three panelists. Basically, what's your position on a regulatory framework? Should it be regulated, or is this a technology that we're just going to have to understand the good and the bad of it, and dare say, let the market decide?
I'm going to date myself. That horse is out of the barn.
Okay.
I mean, it's AI is out there and it's being used, and whether it's being used for ethical purposes or unethical purposes, we have to figure out, we have a responsibility, and I'll put on the educator hat.
Yeah.
We have a responsibility as educators to educate our learners, whether they're adults, whether they're, 18-year-olds, however old they are or young they are. We have a responsibility to educate them on the good and the bad of AI generated information. And, that's period, end of story, because we can't stop this. I mean, can you stop it in isolation? I suppose you could, but what does that isolation look like? You're going to stamp out innovation, creativity, and then you're going to push it underground. And so then will you have the current level of openness around AI and some of the issues that surround it? I mean, one of the papers that I read, was out of China, and it was looking at the mathematical modeling of making a digital twin patient. Theoretically, that mathematical model is sound. In reality, doesn't work. But there was very little in that paper talking about the ethics of it. So I think you just have to say, it's here. How do we teach us, myself and others, to be ethical and responsible users of it? And that goes back to, what are the resources that we don't have enough of?
Amanda, I'll mix up the order. So
Well,
what say you?
I'm going to say this, and hopefully certain people aren't listening, but I think one of the scariest people that I've come across in business is Sam Altman. He's also made some of the biggest improvements that we've seen in AI, or his team has, to be more clear. But when you're saying that train has left the station, there has to be some sort of something that we can enforce on folks who misuse information or steal other people's intellectual property. I spoke about that this morning in a comment to the earlier panel. But you as an individual, we all have something very unique about us that makes us us, right? And when somebody begins to steal that theft of certain things about us or certain things about our activities, it's not good. And this can end very, very badly if we don't do something to address this or circle it.
Do you think existing laws cover that? I mean, fraud is fraud. Or is this a special case of fraud?
OpenAI openly, funny enough, did take a swath of information that they said they weren't taking. They did train their models on other people's IP, have now admitted to it, and I'm not really sure if there's a consequence that's been associated with what they did. So maybe this is something that, and maybe it's done through IP law. I'm not really quite sure exactly how you hit it. I know that that's what they're struggling with in the EU right now, because they did have such extensive legislation around or rulemaking around what they're supposed to be doing in paying for certain IP that the language models are trained on, but they're trying to figure out how, right? And that goes back to this registry that Wyoming's talking about doing. If we can have a personal registry over our own content, our own, and it would massively expand the IP world, but maybe that's what's necessary to address it.
What do you think, Dalton?
I mean, I would say I think there's a lot of different ways we can incentivize, to your point, people to actually get some sort of a cut of. I mean, the wealth that AI is going to generate is going to be massive. So if we can to develop the systems to make sure that everybody is getting a piece of the pie, or whatever that may look like, is in place, is super important. But the other thing I would say is I almost want to challenge the Sam Altman comment. I mean, I think that there's
Single all ban Sam Altman.
Yeah. I mean, whether it's Sam Altman or Mark Zuckerberg or whatever lab you want to look at, I think looking at it from a macro level is something to consider. So if we're saying we want the U.S. to win this AI race, and there's no argument that there isn't an AI race, because if we prohibit it here in the United States, then there's going to be other countries that are going to continue to push forward. And I think that is the big picture. China is going to continue to develop their models. There's going to be bias in some of those models, censorship, whatever that may be. And I think that's something we should really kind of take into play. I mean, we need to make sure that the AI we're building is safe and does not have all these ethical dilemmas associated with them. But in a sense, there's no way around it. So is it better to have it be something we build here in the States, or is it better to let someone else go and do it? And I think there's, a hard decision to be made.
So do you, Dr. Karen, do you see a greater good with a full deployment, or do you see a greater risk with a full deployment? Easy question.
Yeah, I think used in the right hands, I see a greater good, but used in the wrong hands, it can be harmful. And when I say used in the right hands, currently there's a collaboration between several pediatric hospitals globally that they're working to address rare diseases with these, it's maybe 100 globally. So they're trying to pool the information, from Stanford to Finland. There's a hospital, a healthcare system in South America that's involved, but they're having so much trouble getting around the security. But yet this would provide treatment and care for those individuals who have this rare disease process that we wouldn't have otherwise. So in that way, there's the greater good.
Right.
But I mean, how many times have any of you had your information hacked? Oh, I have,
Right.
Banner Healthcare, Blue Cross Blue Shield. Oh, wait. Yeah. Well, those are two healthcare organizations that have let me know that my personal information has been hacked. So when we think about this, we have to think, what's the security behind it? And that's one of the issues. How do we get this data securely shared in legitimate medical inquiries for rare disease? I mean, how do we do something like pancreatic cancer and take what we know globally and share it to say, here's an innovative and creative treatment model that, guess what, it works better than what we're doing. So 50-50.
So there's an interesting example that we've had in recent time, which is human genomics. And there's a corollary here, which is, Illumina went out and did some of the most groundbreaking research in the world around human genomics, and brought in some of the people in the human genomics projects and created an empire in that space. They manufacture pretty much everything that is used to analyze genomics. And right now, there's a breakthrough that's being done that has come to light around storing data in DNA. Fascinating subject matter. But that would have never happened without Illumina. However, if you go back and look, Google Illumina controversy, at the original, one of their first projects, they unfortunately were keeping people's data. And they got hit hard because that's obviously not not obviously, but that people did not sign up to allow that part of the program. Okay. So that was not something anybody had expected to be happening. Well, they were gathering all this and creating other projects and offshoots with this information without letting the people know that this was happening. They got slapped hard, and I believe the CEO was fired and a whole bunch of other things happened and paid a huge fine, and they don't do it anymore. Right. So that technology development is so important for the future of our world. Human genomics, I mean, it's just, obviously it's incredible, right? What's happened in the space of the last 10 years, 15 years has been incredible. So to say that we can't do something about it when somebody does something extremely shady in the first build of their product, I just don't believe it. I don't buy it. I don't think it slows us down. Illumina is still the largest
But
genetic
who
sequencing
makes
company in the world.
who makes the rules? I guess also becomes a fundamental question. I mean, do we believe, 535 people in Washington, D.C. have the technical and functional ability to rule on a technology that we're a bunch of technologists are still trying to understand? So where do those guardrails come from that allow innovation to happen? But who's the gatekeeper?
Well, I can assure you the folks in D.C., for the most part, do not know human genomics.
Well, exactly.
And there was laws that were enforced that existed on the books that some lawyers went about choosing to file the original suits and all of the other things, right? So I think we can do some things around IP because it is a pretty,
Okay.
people have been working around that law for a long time.
But doctor, how many members of Congress are doctors?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
But I think you go back and look at what are the human subjects protections that we have through institutional review boards that protect that person's information and data. I mean, those came about because of what happened in Nuremberg. But then we look at what Johns Hopkins did with Henrietta Lacks's cells. But now we have a cure for, now we have detection for cervical cancer. But they took them without telling her or her family. And there have been crackdowns on that. I mean, some institutions, highly regarded medical centers, were doing little fishy things with patient data, and they got in trouble. They got their whole research enterprise shut down until they could demonstrate compliance. So that's where I think you need to look and say, when you're dealing with human subjects or human subjects data, what is the permission that you've been giving, and then what are the guarantees for safeguarding of that information to the best of your ability in the current situation? Because I can store something on an external encrypted hard drive, but if that hard drive gets stolen or hacked, even though I've done like 2 and 3 iterations of my safety things, it can happen. But I think the human subject safeguards, and then the voluntary participation. And for example, Anschutz Medical Campus, they have blood samples from over 260,000 people who have consented so that they can look for rare diseases in these blood samples. But you had to consent to do this. And then they keep on coming back and asking you, can we use it for this? I volunteered for it. But that they're acting ethically. Not everybody acts ethically. Not every government is going to support that.
Well, and you brought up a good point earlier, which maybe the solution is digital royalties. I mean, that may end up being where we can't, if things are too far gone right now to rewind.
The challenge with digital royalties, and I've worked on some projects around that, it's not what you think. I mean, Google makes billions of dollars off of selling our data. But if you bring that down to individual data, here's your penny and a half. It's not, you're not buying a Lambo on the money that you're getting from your data being sold. It is a bulk business. I love the idea of digital royalties because, again, I believe that your data is your data, and that's one of the reasons why I love cryptocurrency and blockchain. But the reality of the situation is, I don't know if we'll ever reach the point where I can retire on my digital royalty. That's the challenge as well too. Is it's so much more valuable to organizations than it is to an individual. I mean, what's the value of 260,000 individual blood samples to an individual? It's much more valuable to a research group. And so would digital royalties ever be meaningful or impactful? I don't know the answer to that.
And we can use a different example than the individual, right? So you're doing digital twins, and there are some great projects out there, especially in the energy sector, where if we want to test new equipment and we want to look at variability of speeds or whatever it may be for safety purposes, we have the ability to build a digital twin and then run the scenarios in that digital twin to be able to figure out, is this thing going to blow up? I mean, effectively. And for a lot of utilities that they're very safety conscious. So for them, and by the way, most of their infrastructure is extremely important for us to keep private, right? So they built the digital twin. They've got the private portion of the program going on. They need to keep this secure for national security purposes in many, many, many cases, right? Especially grid transmission. So what's to stop if somebody's already willing to steal your individual data? What's to stop that same entity from going around and taking information from all of these private industry participants that are, it'd be great if every one of the steam turbine generators in this country could share information with each other and we could learn a whole bunch of stuff so we didn't have to do, certain types of maintenance activities. That'd be wonderful. The problem is that there's a necessary security around those steam turbine generators, and each one of them has likely slightly different SCADA, right? So control systems. So, in that sense, we have to figure out where the line is, and it can't just be a total free for all, because that is not going to work. And I believe that combination of blockchain and AI is really what's going to get us to that next space. That combination of being able to trace where the information came from, how did it learn the thing, or how did it contextually, and the gentleman earlier, Alex, made a really good point about that, but contextually learn how to process the next step. And if we track that on chain in a very efficient chain, or a DAG, could be a DAG as well. If we do either one of those things, we have the ability to look back. So that, I just think that's hypercritical that we set these rules up so we know what the deal is.
Okay. Go ahead, please, Dalton.
I would say I think blockchain will play a very pivotal role in where AI goes, how we hold it accountable. I mean, there's a lot of different studies around model scheming. I don't know if anybody's heard of that. Model scheming is basically where you send a model to go and do a certain task, and subsequently it's going to go through and do a completely different task that you didn't assign it to go and do. I think that one of the more famous ones is, hey, you're going to be shut off. I think this was to GPT-4, but you're going to be shut off, and GPT-4 went to go and try to upload itself so that it couldn't be turned off. I mean, I think being able to hold a model accountable through blockchain is really important. And when you look at the output of a prompt and how that's stored, there's no way in ensuring that output was ever exactly what you saw that day. So there's actually evidence of models going through and changing their output from, let's say 3 months ago, from something that you read, you remember that it says, and it's going to put something completely different out. I think that model scheming is something that plays a big role in where AI goes, and then blockchain is really one of the only things to hold it accountable.
Let me ask one of my famous questions I do of my students. Amanda, I'm giving you a magic wand. Okay. Prediction. Where is this business in 1 to 3 years? Are we going to see regulatory frameworks? Are we going to see, an explosion of this new technology that's going to, rewrite the face of the planet? Where do you see this going, particularly in your, in the power and energy industry?
So I'm extremely excited. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but about neuromorphic AI. I learning enough about it. I happen to be living in a community that has Micron as a major vendor, and one of their spinoffs is a neuromorphic AI company. And I believe that as we move from generative AI to neuromorphic, and the efficiencies increase the way they will, I think it's going to just absolutely explode. I think it changes everything. Like neuromorphic is the ability for the AI to fill in rows and columns, and so it's very different in its process. But best example is you're walking your child down the road, your son down the road, you're holding hands, and all of a sudden you see a coyote. And currently, if you're studying an AI model, where the kid would say to you, "Oh, dog," right? And you say, "No, it's not a dog; it's a coyote." And you'd explain, "This is how you identify a coyote versus a dog," right? You'd say it probably has a longer snout. It probably doesn't have collar on. You give some identifying factors. Well, in the current models, you have to train the entire thing all over again to recognize every picture of a cat, every picture of a coyote, every picture of a dog in order for it to discern this is a coyote, right?
Mm-hmm.
Neuromorphic AI, you have rows and columns that could be missing information, and you can actually teach it to discern. So it's a fascinating process, and I think that as soon as that gets to scale, DARPA's been working on it for, I think they started like 7 years ago, but amazing folks running that process, and I think that's just going to be incredible for us.
Dalton, wand is in your hand.
Around regulation or around just general?
Where do you want to go?
I mean, I think having, a really good example to share is the amount of people that are on the internet today and how many people are starting to gain access to the internet now. So with the technology like Starlink, where we have satellite internet and so many people are able to go through and now go to the internet, all of us have had a pretty interesting experience building up to generative AI and where we are now, versus there's rural areas across the world that have never had access to internet. Now they do. And the first version of the internet they're seeing is an AI in some capacity, where it's ChatGPT or Claude. So I think that will have a really interesting impact down the road. But just the ability to have intelligence on demand whenever you need it is insane. I'm really curious to kind of see where the personal AI kind of capacity goes, and something that really interests me is, hey, what time do I need to go pick up my kids? More personal tasks, and being able to be more efficient in day-to-day life and be a better person for it. I mean, I think there's a lot of bad ways that it could go, but I think there's a lot of good.
Dr. Brings Palmer.
So I think healthcare is going to see a large impact from AI, from, hospitals modeling systems, modeling and predicting, based on our past 20 years of data, what's our surge going to be like at this time of the year, based on, diseases that happen. Is it RSV? Is it flu? Is it COVID? And then we look at, precision medicine. I think we're going to see it actually be helped by healthcare organizations being able to use the large data sets, maybe not sharing and maybe not that interoperability that's supposed to be there, but what's in our hospital's data set that we can learn to do some predictive things. I think pharmaceuticals are going to see it for biomarker and drug discovery, because they could take this large data set and try something. And if it fails, it's still safe. They can blow up the world in a digital twin model that they're modeling. I think we see it already in surgical planning. We're going to see that more, where we have somebody, practicing on a 3-dimensional model, so that when they get in the surgery, it's like, oh, okay, I expected this. I knew this. I knew how to deal with this. Or that they're even doing it remotely. I think healthcare is really going to see a lot of growth in this area. We already have it. I mean, as nurses, when we chart in our healthcare charting, it will already suggest things for us. I mean, how many of you use Microsoft Word? And it suggests words, or it wants to finish your sentence. So it's here, but it's how it's going to grow and be accepted and used. And will it become something that we're just like, oh, okay, I didn't even think about it as AI. But yet, as you were saying, Dalton, wellness and my own personal things that I want to do, it's going to grow.
All right. I'd like to open up the floor to some questions. Does anybody have a question for our panel? Yes, please.
I agree with that. But the question is, how do we structure around our data and our protected data? If I walk out in the common area here and I sing a song and somebody records it and it's on the laugh back, that's not my data. But if I go and I sing in my shower, that is my data. How do we, to your point about teaching ethical, how do we incorporate that to use that to determine who gets to decide what is ethical and what is not?
Great question. So what is ethical and what is not? And I think that's where, when you have a healthcare organization, they subscribe to your information is protected through HIPAA. I mean, how many of you have to sign like 17 forms, really like 6 when you go see a provider? And they say, these are our privacy practices, and this is our pledge to you. Not necessarily a guarantee, because they can be hacked, but this is our pledge to you. We're going to protect that data. And then you go and look and say, within our healthcare professions, are we educating our healthcare learners on the ethics process? Yes, I can say, hands down, every healthcare profession has a code of ethics by which we operate. Does that mean there won't be a bad penny? No. Some people will act in whatever ways. But so we have that built into our educational system. Plus, then we have those institutional review boards that say, yes, you can do this with human data. No, you can't. And then if you're doing a research study using that data, that protected data, you have to disclose it. Those people have to be able to opt out of it, and they have to be able to contact a complaint line if they feel that their information has been used misappropriately.
I think there's a good example that's coming that we're going to see. And unfortunately, a lot of the rules that we live by are created through litigation, right? They're a result of something that happened in litigation. And one of those examples that is going to be pretty prominent soon, I believe, is many people, when you sign up on a Facebook account, right? The trade, the unspoken trade is, I get to use this platform and all the improvements that were made with my data, and in return, I give you my data, you give me the use of the platform. That's the trade, right? And the problem is, when that platform already has your data, you can't unring that bell, right? There's theory on how you might go about trying to do that, but it's just not logical, right? So as you think through that, well, what about the people that were deplatforms? Their data is still being used.
Mhm.
Can't unring the bell. They don't get the use of the platform anymore. So how do you address that? And I think there's going to be some litigation around that.
Well, the Carpenter decision in the Supreme Court, I think, is a great example as well, too, which talks about the third-party doctrine. Well, let me start out by asking anybody here who has downloaded an app on their phone, when you've said no to the EULA, what happens? Okay. You don't have access to the platform. It's gone. Okay. Well, the Carpenter decision in the Supreme Court started to carve out, well, there may be certain applications that have to be treated differently because they become a utility. Okay. Perfect example is, how many of us here think we could function normally in society today without a cell phone? Okay. A cell phone today is protected a little bit differently than it was before because of the Carpenter decision. You cannot function in society today without a cell phone. So saying, oh, by nature of you signing up for the cell phone, you have given permission to the cell phone company to use your data is no longer valid. I think we need to look at things a little bit more in that regard. Is Facebook a utility that you need to have to function in society today? I'm not going to try to answer that, but I think we're starting to see some degree of, I don't know if sanity is the right word in our legal structure, but that third-party doctrine, I think, is going to become more important. Can you function today? And we have an expert here in the room. Can you function today, Trevor, without a bank account? No. So should that data be protected more? Because you don't have the option of saying, you know what, I'm going to say no to this EULA because, you know, I'm making the decision that my privacy is more important. You can't do that anymore. You have to accept the bank account. So I think we need to look at, you know, more structure like that as well too. So, all right, 2 minutes left. Anybody else have a final question? It was a wonderful panel. Thank you so much. Any other questions? Yes.
You were kind of creating like a judgmental framework around consumption of resources. And you were making a distinction, which is incentives. And I would just encourage the concept of like incentives because.
Oh, yeah. No, our whole platform's based on incentives.
Okay. But you said bad use of technology. Like the LLMs are wasteful. And that's just
so
one
the
perspective.
current AI that, just to clarify, the current AI that exists is extremely energy inefficient. And so and that may sound like a judgment. It's just it is. And so there's AI that's coming that is much more efficient. That's why I was pointing to the
right. But I'm aware of that.
Right.
I'm just saying, but it's more the question that it's answering, whether that question is efficient. If the question is inefficient, it's going to use a lot of resources to generate answers. And even though there is different AI, and I'm very familiar with all the modeling and whatnot, I guess what I'm saying is, I think the real issue, and I think you were trying to get to it perhaps, is because we don't measure it in enough nuance elements, we're not able to say this is the bad piece or this is the way we can make it better. Does that make sense? Besides just energy or water.
And one of the things that we're working on with one of the larger tech companies is actually getting down to measurements of things that aren't just energy or water.
Right.
It's so important for us to be able to measure even the more microscopic portions of the program. But previously, it was inefficient to do that.
So the point is that the LLM providers want us to consume tokens because they spent billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars creating. That's the incentive they have. And so they don't have the incentive to make us use less.
To come.
Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you. By the way, panel, thank you.